Level 989.
Welcome to a 989 on Health Extra. These quick supplements should help ease any withdrawal symptoms you may experience while waiting for our next full episode. So, Mike, what's on today's agenda?
Here's a question I've asked myself a few times over the past few years. Am I addicted to listening to podcasts? It might be hard to believe for some of you. How could anyone be addicted to listening to something? Especially just listening to people talking. Could you be addicted to listening to music? Is it a silly question? Really, all of our brains are different. You can become addicted to any behavior. Well, what is addiction? We had a nice long talk about addiction in episode 52. It's a great episode. You should check it out if you missed it. In episode 52, we mentioned that there are substance addictions and there are behavioral addictions. And when it comes to behavioral addictions, it's definitely a real thing. For the average Joe breakdown, I'm going to quote from Wikipedia. Behavioral addictions, which are sometimes referred to as impulse control disorders, are increasingly recognized as treatable forms of addiction. The type of excessive behaviors identified as being addictive include gambling, food, sexual intercourse, use of pornography, use of computers, playing video games, use of the internet, exercise, and shopping. Of all of those, if I had to choose an addiction, I think I'd make it exercise. But anything can be unhealthy if you take it too far. Imagine you've pulled a leg muscle, but you still feel the need to work out. You could do your body some permanent damage just because you can't resist the siren song of the Stairmaster. Here's another quote from the same article, which will, of course, be linked in the show notes. In August 2011, the American Society of Addiction Medicine, or the ASAM, issued a public statement defining all addiction in terms of brain changes. Addiction is a primary chronic disease of brain reward, motivation, memory, and related circuitry. This definition says that addiction is about functioning and brain circuitry, and how the structure and function of the brains of persons with addiction differ from the structure and function of the brains of persons who do not have addiction. We all have the brain reward circuitry that makes food and sex rewarding. This is a survival mechanism. In a healthy brain, these rewards have feedback mechanisms for satiety, or enough. In someone with addiction, the circuitry becomes dysfunctional, such that the message to the individual becomes more, which leads to the pathological pursuit of relief through the use of substances and behaviors. Internet addiction is a psychological disorder, and its characteristics are as follows: tolerance, withdrawal symptoms, affective disorders, and problems in social relations. Internet usage creates psychological, social, school, and/or work difficulties in a person's life. 18% of study participants were considered to be pathological Internet users, whose excessive use of the Internet was causing academic, social, and interpersonal problems. Excessive Internet use may create a heightened level of psychological arousal, resulting in little sleep, failure to eat for long periods, and limited physical activity, possibly leading to the user experiencing physical and mental health problems such as depression, OCD, low family relationships, and anxiety. That was a long quote. I wish I had the failure to eat for long periods problem. So, okay, what makes me think I'm addicted to podcasts? Well, it started out slowly, as these things tend to do. I started out over 10 years ago now with the very first iPhone that was released, listening to podcasts during my commute to and from work. That's pretty normal. I had a call center type job, so listening to podcasts at work really wasn't an option since I was on the phone with customers all day. But then I changed jobs to a better paying job with a short commute. Success! But I was also off the phones. I was sitting at a desk doing very boring work, and I was allowed to listen to whatever I wanted. This is where things really took a turn. I went from listening to maybe 2 hours of podcasts every day during my commute to listening 6 or 8 hours of podcasts all day, every day. I even started listening on my days off. I'm currently subscribed to almost 30 podcasts, many of which post every week. And even with that many, I'll still run out of podcasts to listen to. Just have to go search for new ones to listen to just to fill the time. I mean, I can't very well be left alone with my own thoughts, can I? It probably won't surprise you to hear there are times when my ears hurt. I just crave some silence, some peace. I'll take my headphones off and sigh in relief, enjoy the quiet time. And then within about 2 minutes, max, I have to put the headphones back on and hit play. The quiet is just too lonesome. So I'm just lonesome? Bored? Yeah, that seems about right. Counting work and sleep, I spend probably 95% of my time alone. I have a weird job and a weird work schedule. I very rarely see my friends, and even my wife. There are many days every week when we will literally see each other about 20 minutes before bed. Even in our modern world, most people still work a 9-to-5 job. If you want to have lunch dates with pals, weekly board game night with a group, a weekly book club, social day trips, all that sort of healthy interaction, well, your schedules have to align. I remember talking with Brandon. I can't remember which episode it was now. I'm sure it came up in a few episodes over the past couple of years, but sometimes the treatment for an illness is you need to change jobs. Because if your work schedule is impacting your health, that job is just going to continue to wear you down. One guy I know at work, he's worked third shift for years. He's single, he seems like a great guy, but he's lonely. Work is his life. But when you're on a third shift schedule, how do you meet new people? How can you find time for dating? Even when you're off duty, you're either sleeping or everyone else is. So he's kind of stuck in a bad place. Work can mess you up in a lot of ways. My work schedule is weird. I typically work 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. with random instances of third shift or first shift stuffed in there. But my current schedule has made going back to college possible, so that's good. I have time for going to the gym, working on personal projects and hobbies, running household errands, going to doctor's appointments. I'm not necessarily complaining. The schedule is useful, but it's isolating. The human factor is missing in my life, and it seems as if I'm trying to get some of my interaction from listening to podcasts. That's something of a disjointed, troubling thought. I can laugh along with someone on a podcast, but I'm not interacting. I'm reacting. Those folks I'm listening to don't know me. We're not having a conversation. It's like watching Star Wars and thinking that you and Luke Skywalker have a great rapport. You're not friends. Luke Skywalker is a character, and you are a member of the audience. There's a meme picture I'll include in the show notes. You know, meme pictures. It's a picture of some scene with the blocky white text added on, making some funny quip. Anyway, there's a meme picture about enjoying podcasts. There's an advertising poster of 3 pretty girls enjoying some ice cream. And in the poster, they're laughing and having a grand old time. And there's a guy sitting in front of the poster eating a real ice cream, and he's laughing along with the girls as if he's trying to include himself in their moment. And this so perfectly captures the weird layers of what's going on listening to podcasts. 1, the girls are not really there. It's an advertising poster. 2, their fun is not actual fun. It's a performance. 3, this guy is alone, but he doesn't want to be. And if you want to get really meta with this meme, he's not alone since someone's taking the picture. But instead, he's spending time with the poster. It's like turning your real-life lover away so you can spend some special alone time with internet porn. An article over at Slate.com puts it this way. Podcasts occupy a sophisticated position within what we might call the feel-good web. At least for the podcasts I listen to, they're all pretty positive. The article goes on to say, in the case of podcasts, the air literally thrums, our eardrums vibrate, and the cliché of the human touch is physicalized. The empathic encounter in a podcast can be comforting, in this sense even as it knocks us outside of a blinkered comfort zone. Actually hearing the students at Harper High School narrate their experiences on This American Life, and following them down the school hallways helps us begin to understand their circumstances with a different kind of nuance and immediacy than print can muster. Now, you would think I would have gravitated to talk radio back in the day, but I'm not interested in political commentary or sports, which really seems to dominate talk radio. The drive time DJ's chatter would sometimes capture a bit of the magic of podcasting, depending on the personality of the particular DJs, but the topics were never right. They're just chatting about the local news stories of the day, which I have to say I never find interesting. I'd rather listen to a good discussion about a book, a movie, a TV show, all the stuff in life that doesn't really matter. I need my escapism to be escapist. What about audiobooks? I found audiobooks too expensive. Even with an Audible.com subscription, $20 for an audiobook that's 15 hours long that I'll listen to in 2 days or less? Even at $20 per audiobook, that would be 3 audiobooks a week and $60 a week or over $3,000 a year. Yes, you can get audiobooks from the library, but the selection is limited and the process is often frustrating. Most podcasts are free. Also, I don't know if being addicted to audiobooks would be any better than being addicted to podcasts. My favorite podcast is called The Incomparable, where a large group of very smart, very funny people get together every week and talk about geeky escapism. From a classic black and white film to a fantasy novel, the latest Marvel movie, TV show, to Christmas music, whatever they're in the mood to discuss. And when I listen to the great folks on The Incomparable, it's like I'm right there with them. We're all hanging out, having a fun conversation. Usually my own pet theories or comments get mentioned by someone, and I can cheer when someone points out my points, and grumble when somehow a 6-person panel missed the most important factor that only I noticed. Very fond of a number of other podcasts as well, and I'll put a link in the show notes. There's an article over at The Atlantic titled Podcasts Are the New Xanax. It's by Pamela Druckerman. Quote, "Before long, listening to podcasts was almost medicinal. At first, this seemed like a virtuous habit. Unlike the time sink of binge-watching a TV series, podcasts actually made me more efficient. Practically every dull activity, folding laundry, applying makeup, became tolerable." And Pamela goes on to say, "Podcasts gave me the illusion of having a vibrant social life. I was constantly meeting new people. My favorite hosts started to seem like friends. I could detect small shifts in their moods and tell when they were flirting with guests. Unlike actual friendships, which were tinged with jealousy and resentment, these were stress-free. A good podcast conversation was like a dinner party, full of fascinating people, but without the risk of saying something stupid and embarrassing myself." End quote. All right, I think I've made my point, and then some, probably. Podcasts can be addictive for some people. We get it. Okay, is that a problem? Gambling addiction might result in losing your car, your house, your job, your spouse. What are the side effects of podcast addiction? Well, podcast listening involves technology, which means there's a lot of ways it's unnatural. One of these ways is editing. The amount of editing a podcast might receive varies widely, from zero editing to something heavily produced and polished. I tend to listen to podcasts that fall somewhere in the middle. These are podcasts that cut out a lot of the annoying biological stuff. Long pauses, coughing, sneezing, throat clearing, sniffing, lip smacking, and so on. All of these very human noises are simply edited away, either by humans or software. And it sets a different standard in your mind when you're talking with a normal human in a real conversation. Suddenly that normal, perfectly polite human seems like some kind of grunting, snorting Neanderthal. All those human noises that they're making that you're no longer used to, since you listen to podcasts for 10 hours a day. So, due to editing, your expectation of what a normal conversation sounds like has been miscalibrated. I use an app to listen to my podcasts, and that app is called Overcast. Overcast is a great app, has a lot of nice features, including Smart Speed and Voice Boost. Now, Voice Boost is pretty straightforward. It boosts voices. Smart Speed allows you to tweak the audio you're listening to even further and shorten silences. So if the person speaking in the podcast pauses for 5 seconds and didn't edit that out, the Overcast app will cut out a good portion of that quiet moment. So it's re-editing the podcast on the fly. And you can also increase the speed of the audio. In fact, you can increase the speed of the audio to 3 times normal speed. I typically don't play podcasts any faster than normal speed, but there are times, maybe some geology professor's giving a very dry lecture and he speaks very slowly. I can speed it up and it becomes a lot more listenable. But you get hooked on that ability. And when you're visiting in person at Aunt Gertrude's house and Aunt Gertrude is very slowly telling you about her visit to the podiatrist last week, you're just shaking with withdrawal because there's no smart speed button for Aunt Gertrude. It's not as if you don't care about Auntie. You're interested. You want to hear the story, but you've become very reliant on the ability to speed up a conversation at your whim. Also, just like people with terrible voices usually don't end up as professional radio personalities, podcasters tend to be well-spoken, intelligent, funny, and very knowledgeable. If a person is on a podcast episode talking about the books of Stephen King, they've probably read a good number of the books and are prepared to have an in-depth discussion about them. I'm not a big Stephen King fan, it's just an example. But it's hard to find people in real life that are knowledgeable about my particular fandoms and interested in or prepared to have an in-depth discussion about them. See also my bad schedule and never seeing my friends. The average person I bump into at work isn't ready for a very geeky discussion about time travel in popular fiction. I've also noticed myself choosing household tasks based on whether I can listen to podcasts or not. So cleaning the bathrooms, yes, I can listen to podcasts. And vacuuming the carpet, not so much. I tend to wear Apple AirPods, which are super comfortable, but do nothing to block noises in the environment. Although, I recently bought some noise-canceling ear-covering headphones for the gym that allow me to vacuum and listen to podcasts at the same time. Hooray! More time for podcasts. If only they were waterproof, since I can't listen in the shower. I wish I were joking. I take very short showers, or I would have purchased a waterproof Bluetooth speaker a long time ago. But I also noticed myself choosing tasks at work based on podcast listening. I could do work task A, or I could do work task B. Well, if I do A, I can keep on listening to my podcast. So, task A it is. Is that good? Shouldn't I be calculating based on need or efficiency or priority? I mean, I'm doing fine at work, don't you worry, I'm just saying. Another problem with my addiction is being less social, even when I have the option to talk. Let's say my wife is home, I'm home, maybe it's a Sunday afternoon, she's on the computer, I'm cleaning the kitchen. I tend to listen to podcasts while I'm doing chores, and she's in the other room paying bills and researching for our upcoming vacation and so on, which is fine on one level, but my listening blocks the option for small moments of random chit-chat that she and I would otherwise have if I were slightly occupied but available to talk, just as she is. And most of life is little moments all strung together. I also have less time to just be left alone with my own thoughts, to daydream and plan and ponder life goals and so on. So I've self-diagnosed myself with a problem. What action should I take to solve that problem? Well, it won't surprise you to hear there are two main treatments for impulse control disorders, drugs and therapy. I'm not interested in going the drug route. Caffeine is plenty for me, thank you. So that leaves cognitive behavioral therapy, which focuses on developing coping strategies to help change unhelpful patterns. But listening to podcasts is my coping strategy. So now I need to cope with coping? If you have one hobby that's an obsession you fanatically devote yourself to, people might think you have a problem. But if you split your time among 5 different hobbies, you're just fine. Is that how it is? Obsessive gardening is a problem, but gardening and model trains, well, you're good to go. Cognitive behavioral therapy is interesting. We could do a whole series of episodes about it. But basically the end goal is to decrease how often, how long, or how intensely you do the behavior you're having a problem with. If you're smoking a pack a day, let's say a pack has 20 cigarettes. Even cutting that by 1 cigarette a week, in 20 weeks, you've quit smoking. That's only 5 months. And for something that people do for many decades, 5 months isn't that bad. Cigarettes might be a bad example, since I'm talking about behavioral addictions, and cigarettes definitely have a physical addiction component to them, but you get the idea. I guess a good start for me would be to make a personal rule to not listen if my wife is home and awake. Seems silly to have to make that rule, but I think it's a good idea, since those small moments add up. I'll try to pare back my list from 30 to just say my top 10 favorites. Maybe listen to more music to fill any moments that are just too quiet. I can't really promise that much will change while I still have the current job and the current work schedule. But I will be more mindful that listening to podcasts is not harmless, and quiet time can be an important thing. As always, there are lots of useful links in the show notes. Be sure to check these out for more details. Thanks again to our great listeners for sending in suggestions. If you'd like to send in your own topic for consideration, head on over to level989.com/contact and make it so.
That's all for now. You can find links to read more about today's topics at level989.com. Why not take a moment to rate or review us in iTunes, or give us a mention on social media? We can't help everyone if they don't know we exist. Don't rely on us as an alternative to medical advice from a professional healthcare provider. For the full disclaimer, please see our website. Thanks for listening, and now, go health yourself.